Hi, I'm Mike Duggan. I've been teaching restorative dentistry for over 32 years now and to over 6,000 dentists. This video shows how I do it. Real-time, mannequin-based, hands-on, point of view, and patient real. If you are a pre-dental student, an aspiring teacher, an international dentist, join me at Duggan Oral Design, DugganOralDesign.com.
Alright, so far we've got the occlusal reduction done. Your central groove looks pretty far shifted facially. So maybe you're keeping your burr too vertical when you're doing the A-plane here. But let's check the occlusion. So, yeah, you have a ridge here that's sort of going underneath this groove, but you see it's pointing in the wrong direction. Point it in the right direction, and then you can keep the central groove a little bit more in the middle. That'll usually fit the opposing tooth better. Yeah, the other side, the oblique ridge, not too bad, but again, fairly vertical, so your central groove is deeper than it would need to be, and that's going to make the mesial and distal walls a little shorter than they should be. Okay, and don't forget, use the side of the burr on this side of this groove and then flip it over and do the other side of that groove coming up this way. So you got two different sides with the burr in two different orientations. The handpiece is behind the tooth and then it's in front of the tooth. And then you can get the distal angle groove going about the right direction. Always point the burr this way when you're doing the C-plane. You have it pointing much more facial lingually. So that's why the C-plane is too vertical compared to the opposing tooth. So just look down the axis in the mirror and see the direction you're pointing the burr and keep it pointing that direction all the way around here. And it's going to fit the opposing tooth much better. You'll check that using indirect methods. See the B-plane over there? Very little clearance. It's only about 0.5 millimeter right now. So when you do the B-plane on that side, you can use direct vision like this. Take your vertical angle from the adjacent tooth here. Start on the marginal ridge and push all the way through the oblique ridge. But until you've really confirmed, using the bite registration material or bite racks, whatever you want to do, that you've got the clearance just right, then you don't need to go ahead and do anything else. Now we've got about 1 millimeter clearance, but you still need another 0.5 millimeter. Okay, so for this one, and again, actually for these facial cusps, it's not so much about clearance, it's more about reduction, because this is an aesthetic crown. We want to get a full 2 millimeters of porcelain over these cusps. Right now I'm thinking you haven't reduced this facial cusp at all in the premolar. The molar probably just 1 millimeter or so. You might be closer there on the molar, but we're going to make sure we get good facial cusp reduction as well as the clearance. And then for the functional cusp, we're going to make sure we get clearance. So right here on this one, you don't have enough clearance yet. So shift the ridge more to the distal. And again, keep the burr more horizontal, like a 45-degree angle when you do the C-plane, and keep it 45 degrees around the corner here and here. So you're working hard to get clearance on the mesial marginal ridge. That's good because the opposing cusp is right there. But shift the ridge on the B-plane a little more distally, and then it'll be easier to come all the way down there. All right, so you're a little bit heavy on your axial reduction at the shoulder there right now. That's about 1 millimeter. That's closer to 1.5 millimeters. This burr is 1.2. But make a full millimeter from here to here. Okay. Now over here, you're a little bit more uniform. Let's check the tapers. So take the taper from the middle third of the adjacent tooth here. Close, but at the bottom you're leaning out a little bit, so you can adjust that. Over here, you're definitely leaning outward. So get the right taper. That'll make this cusp shorter. Then you can do the final 2 millimeters reduction using the A-plane. But make sure the taper is just right to begin with. See the depth cut you did here? You have the burr leaning totally away from the axis, right? Go back and make the depth cut again with the burr leaning this way, toward the axis. Especially important when we're doing bridge preps. So over here, you're leaning a little bit away from the axis. Over here, closer. But again, make sure that once you get the taper, that you get a full millimeter at the bottom of each depth cut in each of these areas. So close to the adjacent tooth, a full millimeter shoulder, and then make sure that when you angle it gingivally, you don't have to go subgingival. So make those depth cuts a little higher above the gingival level. But it looks like you're starting to get a little angulation here. Okay. It'll be a little trickier here. So change the taper, but don't let the shoulder go farther subgingivally. So when you angle it gingivally, you'll have to go subgingival anyway, but don't go any more than you need to. All right, so we're pretty close. We're coming along. Keep working on them. Okay.
I messed up.
You messed up?
Yeah.
How'd that happen?
My implant is gone.
Where did it go? Did it fall on the floor?
No, I overcut it. My
Okay.
taper went way too far.
Okay, so you're getting some very heavy occlusal reduction in some interesting places. So one of the things I'm noticing is that your central groove should be shifted more to the middle, about here instead of out here. So your A-plane could have been a lot bigger if you kept the central groove a little bit more in the center. The opposing tooth is kind of telling you where to put the central groove. So about here is where the opposing tooth wants it. Doesn't want it out here. So you're going to have trouble getting clearance in this area, or you're going to get over-reduced one way or the other. Okay, and then your taper on the facial. So you want the taper matching the middle third of the adjacent tooth here. So that's the other reason why you ended up losing your A-plane.
Over-tapering.
Over-tapering, yeah. So that's an issue there. Okay. So we would have typically put this ridge and this ridge exactly opposite the opposing groove. So this one should have been over here, this one should have been over here more. But I would have had the burr a little less vertical, so that the central groove tends to stay more in the middle. And don't forget, we want to reduce all the way down to the marginal ridge. That's how you get a nice long plane. And out the facial groove here. Out the facial groove here, down to the marginal ridge here. So that would have been a little more typical in terms of its anatomy. Now, since you've over-tapered the facial cusps are already reduced a full 2 millimeters, so you got that taken care of. Okay, and then when you do the B and the C planes, okay, we'll get them a little more. Now that I've started reducing the distal marginal ridge, I can come down here more. This burr is getting real dull. Okay, so don't try to keep using it. That's not a skill you should have. Okay, but get the pit in the right place, get the groove coming up, get the groove pointing in the right direction, point the burr this way when you're doing the C plane. And then make sure you finish it around the corner this way. But see, it made a big difference when I reduced the marginal ridge more.
Yeah.
And then I could get the distal pit in a better location and get that groove going right. Okay, so you got plenty of clearance now on the occlusal. You got your 2 millimeters reduction over here. Got a lot of extra axial reduction on the facial. Now, considering your shoulder, the axial reduction at the shoulder is about 1.4. And, 1.0 would have been just fine, right?
Yes.
So you're too heavy there, as well as being over-tapered. Yeah, see your burr is way inside here. It could have been just right here. And then about over here. So pay real careful attention to where you are relative to the adjacent tooth, but how much axial reduction you have at the bottom of each of those depth cuts. Then you can start connecting them together, okay? I'll try to nurse this burr along a little bit more if I can. So once you start connecting them together, keep the shoulder about 1 millimeter above the gingiva. Then angle the shoulder gingially and try to keep the margin above the gingival level there. So if I drop gingivally a little bit more and angle a little bit more, I can maybe make that shoulder look a little less wide. But make sure you get the angle. So again, 3 depth cuts, join together, angle the shoulder. Bang, bang, bang. Get that done. A lot of people don't angle the shoulder. They skip step 3, and then when the chamfer comes through, it's got no place to go. Okay, so one of the things you can do is when you're doing a bridge preparation, you can sort of reinforce, okay, I want this taper on the premolar, I want this taper, same taper on the molar, matching here. So you can do these depth cuts on both teeth at the same time and really make sure you have exactly the same taper. And that's a big help. And on the lingual side as well, you can look along this way and get the same taper. Now, on the lingual side, you're having a little bit of a problem with your chamfer. Okay? So again, how do we make a chamfer? We make sure the end of the, pick the right burr.
Yeah.
Pick a burr that you want, that gives you the size chamfer that you want. Look along the wall, and then make sure you see where the end of the burr is. Now I'm going to lower the patient a little bit here. Make sure you see where the end of the burr is and the taper while you're doing it. Again, keep the end of the burr at the margin all the time. So I'm going gingerly, so we got a taper, we got the chamfer. Now we can come around the corners. This is much easier because we have the mirror to help us. Then we can bring the chamfer around these corners. And again, look along the wall so you always know that you're leading the burr axially. On a bridge, this is incredibly important to make sure you get the right tapers. So we have to taper all the way from here to the other side of the premolar. And when you're coming along here, again, make sure you see the end of the burr at the margin all the time. Keep the margin near the gingiva, so the walls are going to be a little bit taller, but obviously you're going to go through here with the 877. Now you don't have so much to cut because we did a lot more reduction on the distal marginal ridge. And use whatever chamfer burr you want through here, but again, make sure the shoulder is angled gingivally, as it's not quite yet here. Make sure the shoulder is angled gingerly before you try to bring the chamfer through to join it, because you can't join a horizontal shoulder with a chamfer margin. Okay, so keep working on that. But the basic problem you had from the beginning
was the vertical angle.
Yeah, the vertical angle, which changed your central groove position, and the taper on the facial.
Tip on the face.
Right, cool. Okay. Number who?
8 and 6.
What?
Yes.
What? Where see, it says now up there, right?
Oh, yeah, I haven't seen that now.
Yeah, now. That's what everybody else is doing. Isn't that interesting? That tells you something, right? Okay, so you're doing 6 through 8. All right. Well, this is a little bit different, so that's good. Everybody else will do this a little bit later. Okay. So your gingiva is kind of being a little bit flaky here, but you're pretty far subgingival. You know, as far as I can tell. Yeah, the ball burnisher, yeah. So as far as I can tell, you're way down subgingival here. I think the gingival is as far seated as it's going to get. So when you make your depth cuts, make sure you keep them a millimeter above the gingiva, and then when you angle the shoulder, you'll be okay. Okay. So, then you got like a shoulder bevel over here. It feels like it's horizontal, and then there's a big bevel in it. It gets really steep right there. So we're just trying to do an angled shoulder, that's all. No shoulder bevel at this point. Okay, so let's check the axial reduction at the shoulder. So right here, it's about 0.9, not bad. Pretty vertical though. I want to check the angulation of the shoulder too. So you're almost vertical with your angle. So here's horizontal. This would be a nice angle for the shoulder. Don't make it too vertical. The porcelain gets too thin at the margin, and that's going to be a problem. So you have to figure out how to take a shoulder that's too steep and make it less steep. Now, you can figure that out, but you don't have to move the margin in order to correct that. It can still be just fine. Okay, the axial reduction here, maybe 0.6 or so. And again, really steep over here, 0.7. Okay. We really want to have a definite chamfer coming through the proximal. That looks a little bit too horizontal. So again, keep the end of the burr at the margin all the time. That'll work out much better. So you got a little bit of improvement you can do on the shoulders. This is pretty close. So your amount of axial reduction at the shoulder is a little bit better on the canine. Now, the taper should be exactly like the middle third here. So you're good up here, but at the bottom you have a little different angle. So you really want to get this taper all the way down to the shoulder. And then over here, this is the taper we want all the way to the shoulder. So your taper's decent. You're tending to lean a little bit outward as you're getting closer to the line angles. And these two walls, mesial distally, are too parallel. Get some more taper. Okay. Now, the plan is to do full ceramic preps on these. Okay, so I guess you went ahead and started on the second assignment. So now to do a full ceramic prep, at this point, you know, we do 3 depth cuts, we join them together, we angle the shoulder with a chamfer burr, not necessarily using the shoulder diamond, because you don't want a sharp internal line angle. But when you're going to do the axial reduction other places and get a chamfer, we want a 1 millimeter chamfer, but don't start this far subgingival. And that's actually a 1.5 millimeter chamfer. Okay, so what I want to see you do is basically a PFM prep as far as the chamfer is concerned. Just make a nice little 0.5 millimeter chamfer. Yeah, we're going to start with a PFM prep and then we're going to modify it to make a full ceramic. But as far as the axial, and so what burr is this?
012-878.
Right, now why would you use that?
Just for the proximal.
But yeah, I mean, you could use it for the proximal.
877.
You could use it for the proximal, but in order to use it for the proximal, how do you use that burr and make a 0.5 millimeter chamfer? If you're doing a PFM, for example, you want a 0.5 millimeter chamfer in the proximal, right? So how do you use that burr, the 1012, and make a 0.5 millimeter chamfer? Yeah, you have to do 2 passes. Now, if ultimately you want to do an all ceramic prep, you have to do 4 passes with that burr.
Yeah.
That's complicated. So why don't we just try to use a chamfer burr that gives a 0.5 millimeter chamfer to begin with. We'll use it and make the same PFM prep that we've been making all routinely. And we're going to come around and make sure when you get into the proximal, you can use the 877 burr, but don't let the burr get inside the tooth like this. Look how much of a ski jump you're getting there. It's pretty huge, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so make sure that when you use any chamfer burr that you keep the end of the burr at the margin. Okay. And then, but try to keep the chamfer more uniform. So along here, just make sure you see the end of the burr at the margin. Then the chamfer is always going to be exactly uniform. Don't taper too much. Don't look at the wall, look along the wall, and then we're in control. But boy, you sure got reduced axially a lot over here. Now, 7-minute you're leaning the burr a little bit away from the axis. Make sure it's leaning toward the axis. And then reduce until the end of the burr gets to the margin. And again, from the lingual, you can see very beautifully exactly what's going on, so you know you're not getting a ski jump there. You can see exactly where the end of the burr is, so we're going to try to make a 1/2 millimeter chamfer first, then for the full ceramic we're going to make the chamfer a little bit bigger, but we'll save that for the next step. Okay, but let's see you finish the PFMs first on these. So change the vertical angle of your shoulder here. Make a little more axial reduction at the line angles. Here you're so deep subgingivally. So you're going to have to hold the gingiva down when you angle that shoulder a little bit better. And then when we angle the shoulder for a full ceramic, we're going to drop the margin gingivally and raise the burr incisally as it approaches the axial, so you get a rounded internal line angle the way we've done before. So do that on both the facial surfaces. See if you can adjust this a little bit, and then work on the axial reduction. Your incisor reduction looks like it's pretty good on the central, and reasonable on the canine as well. Need to get more clearance. So you're trying not to reduce the marginal ridges. That's why you don't have any clearance or don't have enough. So the object is to reduce the marginal ridges, okay? And you can get a little more cingulum reduction over here, a little more reduction down the marginal ridge over here. Okay, so let's see, finish each one of these up individually a little better, and then we'll see what we can get in terms of mutual draw. All right, cool. Okay.
Sir, I'm feeling more difficult while breaking this distal contact.
Okay, so the upper right, for right-handed people, the proximal reduction is pretty straightforward. You didn't do too badly on the distal of the molar. Okay, got a ball burnisher? Okay. So your chamfer seems to be fairly uniform, and it's a chamfer, not a ski jump. A little bit risky over here, though. Yeah, I want to come back and keep the end of the burr at the margin right here. That's a little bit of a ski jump. And if it slides off like this or like this, it's a chamfer. If it stops, it's a ski jump. Chamfer is kind of weak over here. We could live with it. You didn't angle the shoulder gingivally yet here. Okay, so make sure the shoulder is always angled gingivally. Okay, so take the end of the shoulder diamond and angle it. If you have to hold the gingiva down, do it, but you get it so the ball burnisher slides off. Okay, so on the distal side of the premolar, pretty irregular chamfer, huh? Not too bad here, but what happened on the lingual side? So on the lingual side, you decided to try not to use the mirror. Okay, so but the mirror is what makes it easy here. We can just look along the wall and follow it right along. So make sure that you have been making your good use of your time to make sure you see along these walls. And there's some walls, the only way you're going to be able to see along them is looking in the mirror. Then we're in control. Now over here, when you get to the mesial, you better make the chamfer a little more obvious. Because if your chamfer is not obvious, then the tooth is going to be outside your prep a little bit too much, and it's more likely to hit the adjacent tooth. Okay, so we still don't have a correction on that facial taper for the premolar. A little better on the molar. Still don't have enough clearance on the mesial side here. Okay, I can look through here. Don't need to use bite wax or anything. I can see. I can even take the ball burnisher and measure the clearance right through here. And it's just barely a millimeter, if that. So we'd like to get definitely, the 1.5 mm should fit through there, right? Make sure the 1.5 mm fits everywhere. Make sure you have 2 millimeters of cusp reduction, and you don't have much here at all yet. Right, so get the reduction, then you'll get some clearance too, but make sure you check the B-plane carefully. Okay, so angle the shoulders, get nice shoulders, make the chamfer join the shoulders smoothly. Make sure you check all your occlusal clearances, make sure you don't have any hint of a horizontal shoulder or a ski jump. Okay? All right, getting there though, almost there. Okay, so you just started working on the premolar now. Okay, so you've shifted the ridge, so you're getting pretty good clearance on the mesial marginal ridge. Wouldn't it be nice to get flat planes though?
Yeah.
So don't go back and forth like this, you're going to get big concave areas. So just make a nice, start at the ridge and come a nice flat plane right down to the marginal ridge. Only cut one direction. And then you get nice flat surfaces. Okay, and then, okay, we could make it a little bit more rounded around here for the C plane, but basically pretty close as far as the occlusal reduction. You came through here, the chamfer is a little heavy. You don't have enough angulation of the shoulder there. Got a lot of scratching on the, might want to get a new mirror tip, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and so see the distal chamfer is not really a chamfer,
Okay.
and it's pretty irregular looking. And on the mesial side, it looks like there's a little ski jump there, and part of the wall is leaning axially, and the other part's leaning away from the axis. You got two different tapers on the mesial side. So again, when we end up checking jaw, we're going to check jaw between this wall and this wall, and this wall and this wall. And right now, you got two different tapers on that mesial wall there.
Okay.
Don't forget to finish the C plane around the corner at a 45-degree angle, all the way to the marginal ridge, where it's going to join the facial cusp bevel, right? Okay, but get a cleaner chamfer and a more uniform taper and no ski jumps, and then we'll continue from there.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Cool. Okay. Oops. Right. Thank you. Okay, so let's see how we're going over here. Oops. Okay, and he started on this one, so that's cool. Except we got a little conflict with that canine there, right?
Yeah.
All right, so anyway, let's take a look. So on the anterior bridge, we talked about getting the taper a little bit less here, didn't we? So if you want to, the angulation of the shoulder is too much, so if you want to make it less, take your burr with the taper that you want, and then cut half the shoulder away, and then re-angle it gingerly at a different angle. Now you can do a different angle to the same margin. But we're going to make the all ceramic crown here, so we're going to alter that a little bit. And then notice you still have a huge ski jump on the distal side here, right? So what are you going to do about that? Well, I guess you're going to leave it like that, right? Well, you did. You moved on now. So let's see what we can do about that. So when you over-reduce axial, you're going to make a ski jump. The only thing you can do is come back with the end of the burr at the margin and get rid of the ski jump. And change the taper too. We'll look at the taper in just a minute. But you might have to hold the gingiva out of the way so that we can fix that ski jump. But fix it you must. We've got to have whatever prep we're doing, we always have to make sure that the prep slopes gingerly as it approaches the margin. Over here as well. Now for the full ceramic, we start out with a 1/2 millimeter chamfer and then raise the burr a little bit when we make the chamfer twice the size. Don't raise the burr this much, not all the way up here. So your original chamfer is going to be about like this. And then just lift the burr a little bit, a couple tenths of a millimeter. And then move the wall in farther. And then your chamfer, which is really an angled shoulder, won't be so vertical. Just don't raise it too much when you increase the amount. And then make sure you get a full millimeter all the way around through there. But again, you know, you don't make a heavy chamfer by just taking the burr and cutting in deeper than it's designed to. We cut in with the end of the burr at the margin, then we raise the burr and move the wall in. Don't touch the margin again. So over here for a full ceramic, you still don't have the millimeter that we need here. Okay, and again, when we're going to angle the shoulder with the chamfer burr to make a full ceramic, so you get a rounded internal line angle here. We drop the margin gingerly and we raise the burr a little bit at a time as we approach the axial wall, so that we get an angled shoulder with a rounded internal line angle, which is basically a chamfer. It's just a big chamfer. So in this case over here where we got rid of the ski jump, now we raise the burr a little bit as we approach the axial wall. But let's check your draw. So we can check mesial distally. So we look down this wall here and then shift the mirror over without changing the angle and look at this wall over here. So from the mesial side here to the distal side here, I would taper more. Yeah, I was suspicious about that from the beginning. It looks like it's leaning more away from the axis here.
Yeah.
Over on the mesial side here and the distal side here, no problems about taper. And then you turn this way and check facial-lingually. So look down the facial wall here, obviously it draws here, and then look down the facial wall here, obviously it draws here, but the facial wall, make sure you see the lingual here, make sure you look down the facial and see the lingual here. So facial lingual, you don't have a problem. What about diagonally from this corner to this corner, but also from this corner to this corner, and from this corner to this corner? Okay, and then we turn this way and check from this corner to this corner. That's a little dangerous, especially right in here. And then from this corner to this corner over here, again, taper that whole wall, including the line angle. And then from this corner to this corner, that looks like it's probably okay. So those are all the different sets of opposing walls we have to check for draw. Okay?
Yes. For central, do I need to do like more lingually? I mean, mesial
Good
lingual?
question. You mean in terms of taper or clearance?
Yeah, clearance.
You need more clearance. See right here?
Yes.
So I have the type knot closed. I get a millimeter here, but I'm not quite getting a millimeter here, and definitely not over here. So you've reduced more, but keep reducing until you get the full millimeter.
Yeah.
Okay, and then reduce. I still think you need to reduce more on this marginal ridge over here, and a little bit more on the cingulate as well. That wall's pretty tall. Normally we just look at 1.5 millimeters or so. Okay, let's see how things are going over here. Okay, so that ridge is in a pretty good location and direction. This one, not too bad. Okay, eventually we're going to make a full millimeter of reduction on these cusps because it's a PFM. And when you do the B plane, make it flat all the way across. When you do the A plane, make sure you reduce the marginal ridge. And then it's easy to get the B plane starting at the marginal ridge and cutting flat through all the way to the oblique ridge. And make sure you put your pit, the distal pit, about here, not so much where the oblique ridge should be. All right?
Okay.
Good start though. But anyway, make sure you see what I did on this anterior bridge, and then you can go ahead and change 6 since we've seen it. You can change 6, and then you'll have an adjacent tooth for the prep on 5. Cool. So we'll take a final look over here. Okay. So as far as the occlusal reduction is concerned, you didn't do any more here on this B plane. You still don't have quite enough. Again, we want to get the 1.5 mm through there. So it's not fitting on that premolar yet. You got a funny thing happening here. I'm not sure what that is. You've got two other angles there. So that's a little bit unusual. So when you reduce the facial cusp, you want 2 mm reduction, but mostly we're going to do it by doing the facial reduction, secondary plane, A plane, and then a little bevel.
How do we reduce this facial cusp?
That's what I'm just going to show you. Okay, so facial plane, then the secondary plane, then the A plane, then a nice little bevel. So here's the taper you want for the facial wall, right? So let's change that. Keep this taper right down to the shoulder, then do a secondary plane like this, matching the adjacent tooth at the occlusal third. The A plane would be done like this, and then a little bevel on that facial cusp ridge to get the final 2 mm. The B plane we would have reduced like this, farther down to the mesial marginal ridge, and getting closer to 1.5 mm of clearance. So move that ridge wherever it needs to be. Get a nice big C plane coming all the way around. Comes all the way to the marginal ridge where it joins the facial cusp bevel there. Okay, so now we're getting more clearance that we can use, and we're getting reduction that makes a little more sense on the facial surface. Now, also on the molar, we want to get a little different taper. You're a little off. So take your angle from the middle third of the adjacent tooth here. Reduce at that angle until you get the axial reduction of the shoulder you want. Secondary plane like this. Okay, and again 2 mm off the facial cusp. And so you probably have something close to that. But see, you don't have the clearance you need yet on the B plane. Remember that? It's not much more than 1 mm right now, and we want, again, the full 1.5 mm. So here's your angle. So this is how you get the B plane reduction. And of course, you're going to check the clearance indirectly. But we can look up here a little bit and get a pretty good idea. Since we don't have the adjacent tooth, we can get a better idea than we're used to for getting that clearance there. We can see it pretty clearly, can't we? And then make sure you check here. Make sure your C plane is adequate all the way around with the burr pointing diagonally. Make the groove. Then come down this way, and then of course get a pit and groove coming up this way by doing both sides. Okay, so now we're getting plenty of clearance on the functional cusp, both sides of it. So that's the kind of thing we're looking for. Okay, so let's take the ball burnisher and check your chamfers. Didn't we discuss this area right here? Yeah, we did. It still looks exactly the same. So, still a ski jump there. Okay, the shoulder's not really very adequate here. But then again, that's not in the most visible area. This will be more important, and that's adequate. This is a little bit too much. Not quite enough over here where it's very visible. But most of your chamfers and tapers seem to be reasonable. Did we fix the taper on the distal side? Yeah, so we got draw between the distal and between the mesial walls, or the inside walls. But let's just take that chamfer burr and review how we would fix that ski jump. It's tiny, but you know, it's a ski jump. Okay. Just like a little bit of undermined enamel will get you in trouble. So let's look along this direction. Make sure you see the end of the burr at the margin. You can use direct vision, you can use indirect vision. Whatever you need to do. Indirect vision is by far the easiest way to do it, and the only way to come around the distal lingual and the mesiolingual areas. But anyway, just make sure you see the end of the burr at the margin and you can't possibly get a ski jump. Okay. So mostly it's come out all right, but again, there's certain things you must check and make sure you get them the way you want before you move on to the next part. All right, so keep working on this one. You're going to have to make those depth cuts again on the facial. You have nowhere near enough axial reduction at the shoulder at this point. Okay. So I'll go ahead and replace 3 and 5, and then you can continue on 6 through 8. Okay. There's a really funny chamfer on that.
I was trying to fix that.
And how would you fix it?
By going just around the margin, like below.
No, it has nothing to do with the margin. How would you fix this problem on the distal side of this central?
With reduction, more axial reduction.
Well, you got plenty of axial reduction at the chamfer.
The interproximal.
Well, that's where we're talking about. So you got plenty of axial reduction at the chamfer. Well, what's the real problem there?
The taper?
Yeah. You didn't lean the burr toward the axis at all. Lean the burr toward the axis and then reduce until you get the end of the burr at the margin. So that's what you needed to do to fix it. It has to converge occlusally. Okay? All right, so got some pretty heavy chamfers over here. And your taper, again, we want a taper like this. All the way down to the shoulder. This is the taper I want. See, over taper the molar, you can't compensate for that by undercutting the, the premolar, right? It doesn't quite work that way. Okay, so, and then when you come around those corners, when you make the depth cuts, make sure you have convergence. Still have a little problem over here. This doesn't quite match up, and that's a really clear ski jump, isn't it? Okay, so you'd have to go through and fix this so the chamfer has a chance of joining the shoulder. But remember, the prep has to slope gingerly as it approaches the margin. So we look along each of these walls. We can see exactly where the end of the burr is. We can see if there's any hint of a ski jump or anything like that. Make sure you see where you are gingerly. You went a little bit deeper gingerly than your original margin. Just make sure the end of the burr is always at the margin, then you'll be in better shape. Okay, so your clearance seems to be reasonable on this one. Don't forget, we want to have a nice facial cusp bevel. And 2 millimeters reduction, you're pretty close to that. Okay, we talked about this one as far as axial reduction, but you never have come back to angle your shoulders convincingly.
I did a little bit, but not.
Yeah, just angle it until you're happy.
Okay.
A little bit usually doesn't make people happy.
Yeah.
Okay. So we lean the burr like this.
Yeah.
And just make sure, and over here lean the burr the opposite direction, but always away from the wall. And then along the facial, lean the burr away from the wall. And again, it says PFM, you're going to angle the shoulder all the way to the wall. So make sure you're always looking along the wall so you see what's going on. And then you take your ball burnisher and slide it down. It should slide off the shoulder everywhere. If it doesn't, then you haven't angled it yet. Now this should be cleared up with a chamfer burr.
Okay.
The chamfer is just too heavy. Now you're above the gingiva, so you could drop gingerly with the end of the burr at the margin and fix that up pretty well.
Okay.
You can do a little bit over here. Okay. All right, so occlusal reduction, better on this one. Watch your facial tapers. Watch the axial reduction at the important areas,
Yes.
like the mesial buccal.
I overdid it on the major buccal.
Well, no, you haven't done enough over here.
Oh,
We really want to get a full millimeter around that corner.
okay. I'll do that.
You know, this is where you tended to overdo it on the
I
molar.
overdid it over there.
Yeah.
On the molar, yeah.
All right, and then make sure you bevel everything, no sharp edges. Make sure the C-plane comes around all the way down here to the marginal ridge where it joins the facial bevel.
Okay.
Don't want any sharp edges.
Okay.
All right?
And
Cool.
my oh, you did my central. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we'll take it. Yeah. And then at the bottom of the central, the axial reduction of the shoulder is close. It's a little bit too much in certain areas, but you're getting the right idea.
Okay.
But watch the taper.
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to
Yeah.
change the taper.
Yeah.
And so the taper should be like this. Okay?
Okay.
But the shoulder should be angled like this, not like this.
Okay.
See how vertical it's getting?
Yes.
So that's more like a bevel, and we don't want that for
Okay.
ceramics.
Less vertical.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so let's take a final look at the all ceramic here. Okay, so yeah, still a little bit weak as far as the size of the chamfer right there. And see this angle here? We really want to not have any angles like that. Want to make sure it's really obviously converging. For all ceramic, we want really obvious convergence, really obvious taper. And so let's raise the burr and move that wall in even farther. Make that chamfer a full millimeter. Again, looking from the facial, looking from lingual, whatever works. But make sure it's a full millimeter all the way around. Okay, I'd even want to get more taper on the lingual here. And don't forget also, if it's an all ceramic, we got to get rid of this edge here. Got to get rid of this edge here. Got to get rid of the corners. Nothing's sharply defined. Got to round over the marginal ridges even. Okay? Make sure everything's sort of rounded and smooth. Okay, and so we got rid of the ski jump over here. You didn't really have quite the taper that we wanted there before. So if there's, yeah, see, you're still tending to be undercut there. At the very least, it's parallel.
Yeah.
At the very best, it's parallel, but I think it's a little bit undercut from the mesial side of the central to the distal side of the canine. And we don't want it to be even close to parallel. It's an all ceramic. We want tons and tons of taper. So yeah, don't hesitate to lean the thing and reduce that again all the way down to the chamfer margin. Make sure when you look down here and then slide your mirror over, you can see down here at the same time. Don't take any chances at all. Lots of taper on these all ceramics. Lots of taper, lots of roundness, lots of reduction. Okay, we'd even want to round over this edge right here. We talked about reducing the cingulum a little bit more. You could do that as well. So you just go ahead and reduce the cingulum here and come down the marginal ridge to the same level of the cingulum. Same thing over here. Get rid of the edges. Okay, now it's starting to work pretty well. And again, be careful if your shoulder is too steep. The ceramic's not going to like it. It's going to be too weak at the margins. It'll tend to fracture, but now it's starting to look pretty reasonable. Okay, so go ahead and remove these and you can continue on your posterior. When you're doing the taper facially, you can go ahead and do the taper facially on the premolar at the same time so you know they match. But in any event, whenever you do the premolar, make sure it matches the taper of the molar, as long as you're really happy with the taper of the molar. Okay, So when you come through the proximal, make a full-size chamfer. If the chamfer is weak, look at most of the burrs outside the tooth hitting the adjacent tooth.
Yeah.
So make the chamfer so the burr is inside your prep, and then it's not going to likely hit the adjacent tooth. When you make weak chamfers, it's going to cause you to hit the adjacent tooth. So make sure you always see exactly where the end of the burr is. Make sure it's always at the margin. Make sure you're always getting a nice chamfer, 1/2 millimeter.
Yeah, when I try like that, it's giving me an undercut. So.
Well, again, first choose your taper, and then reduce until you get a chamfer. If you choose the wrong taper and get a chamfer, you get a chamfer but an undercut. So just make sure you have the taper, and then lock that in. Don't change the taper at all until you get the chamfer you want at the bottom. Okay?
Yeah.
And we didn't do a C-plane with a nice groove here. Remember this groove?
Yeah.
Okay, make sure you make that groove and then keep the burr pointing the same way all around here. Then we get a nice well-defined groove that the opposing cusp can fit into. And finish the C-plane around the corner this way. All right, you're coming along. Just work on those axe reductions.
I should come along the line from the lingual, right?
The C-plane? Yeah, the C-plane comes all the way around the corner.
Plane chamfer.
The chamfer?
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't do that for you. Go ahead and just bring the chamfer right through here.
Yes.
Looking the way I am, I can see exactly where the end of the burr is. I can see how deep I am into the tooth. I can see where I am gingival. I can see the taper.
Okay.
There's just nothing more you need to see.
Yeah.
And again, use the mirror wisely.
Yeah.
All right, good. All right, so full ceramic, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, but the first thing you want to do is just make a nice little 1/2 millimeter chamfer. Okay, so that's the first step. Make a nice, when you're doing the axe reduction at least, just make a nice 1/2 millimeter chamfer. So let's see how your taper is doing. That's pretty good. And over here, middle third here, that's pretty good. Your shoulders aren't angled though, and your chamfers are horizontal shoulders instead of being a true chamfer. So we got to make.
For full ceramic, do we need a whole shoulder?
Well, you need a heavy chamfer all the way around.
Heavy chamfer, okay.
Yeah. So when we described it before, so for example, when you angle the shoulder on the facial, you drop the margin gingivally and raise the burr a little bit at a time as you approach the axial wall. That gives you a rounded internal angle. So now the shoulder becomes a heavy chamfer. The heavy chamfer is just an angled shoulder with a slightly rounded internal line angle. That's all it is. But see over here, somehow you got a horizontal shoulder. So we make these areas with the chamfer burr. So what burr were you using to make these areas?
I used 837.
Oh, in the proximals. That's not going to work.
Proximal 877.
Okay, but this burr won't give. Let me see. Let me get this gingiva pushed down.
Once I broke the contact, again I used this 837.
Oh, okay. That's how you ended up with the horizontal shoulder. So that's the last thing you want anywhere around here. You don't want a horizontal shoulder. So you start with a nice 1/2 millimeter chamfer, and then you raise the burr and you move the whole wall in a little farther. That gives you a 1 millimeter chamfer. Okay, so first 1/2 millimeter chamfer, then raise the burr and move the wall in and get a 1 millimeter chamfer. So now when we look down here, we're getting closer to a millimeter chamfer there. Still need a little bit more right here. You got plenty over here obviously, but over here again it's not a chamfer. It's a horizontal shoulder, and that we have to fix. And when you come around this corner, make sure you lean the burr toward the axis, right? Not away from it. So make sure you see the end of the burr at the margin. Generate your nice little chamfer at the bottom, then raise the burr and move the wall in, but do it at the right taper. It's going to be hard to get a rounded internal line angle that we need for a chamfer, that we need for all ceramic, when you use the shoulder diamond here and made a sharp internal line angle, okay? So that's what we don't want, is a sharp internal angle. Porcelain hates any sharp angles, so they're internal angles or external angles. And stay out of the gingiva. Okay? You're way down underneath the gingiva. So just keep the margin above the gingiva. It's not a clinical situation, it's a typodont. So keep the margin above the gingiva. And then again, raise the burr and move the wall in when you want to get a heavier chamfer. Okay, so let's check. Question?
No, sir.
Let's check the axial reduction right here on the facial. That's only 0.5. Okay, so you needed to make heavier depth cuts. Over here you got a nice millimeter. That's good, but over here you need a millimeter. Now, of course, that's how we start, and then when you finish, you're going to have a millimeter all the way around. So we have the way of doing the 3 depth cuts, joining them together, angling the shoulder with the chamfer burr on the facial, and then making a 0.5 millimeter chamfer, and then making it into a 1 millimeter chamfer by raising the burr and moving in farther on the lingual and the proximal. Then we get a 1 millimeter uniform chamfer all the way around. So see if you can end up with a 1 millimeter uniform chamfer all the way around. But again, a chamfer slopes gingially, as does an angled shoulder. So if the ball burnisher doesn't slide off the margin, then you haven't angled the prep. You haven't angled the chamfer. You don't have a chamfer. You don't have a shoulder. And in these areas, you'd have undermined enamel. So that's an issue. All right, and then for an all ceramic, get more taper. Make it obviously tapered. So over here, you might be leaning a little bit away from the wall. So make sure it's really obvious that it's tapered. See over here, you're leaning it away from the axis. Make sure it's obviously leaning toward the axis. And all these walls, and then you can check the draw between the preps to make sure you get that right. Okay, so keep working on it. Okay, so again, for an all ceramic, ultimately we want a nice chamfer,
Yes.
a heavy chamfer, but this isn't a chamfer right here yet.
Yes. That's not.
So before you can make a heavy chamfer, you have to make a 0.5 millimeter chamfer. So make sure that the first time around you get a 0.5 millimeter chamfer. Then when you raise the burr up, move the whole wall in and get a 1 millimeter chamfer. But make sure the prep slopes gingially all the way to the margin with 1 millimeter axial reduction in that area. Boy, you need a new mirror tip.
Yes, I do.
Okay, well, I'll go get you one.
Yes.
Okay, so you're almost a millimeter over here, so keep measuring things. Here you're about 0.5 millimeter, but you're undercut. See that? Lean the burr toward the axis.
Okay.
Get the 0.5 millimeter chamfer, then raise the burr and move the whole wall in farther.
Okay.
And over here, when you raise the burr to make the heavier chamfer, don't raise the burr this much.
Okay.
So first you go around with just a nice little 0.5 millimeter chamfer, then raise the burr just a few tenths of a millimeter, and then move the wall in farther, so that the chamfer doesn't slope too steep.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so you want to get a slope of that chamfer that's kind of like this, but not so steep as you have over here, because you raise the burr up too much.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and a little heavy over here, obviously. It should be just a millimeter. This is a better
More
look.
than a millimeter.
So try to make it uniform all the way around. Reduce the marginal ridge down here on the lingual fossa area a little bit more.
Okay.
And obviously you haven't reduced the cingulum here
No,
yet. Haven't
not
done
yet.
that.
Not yet.
Okay, so let's check your tapers on the facial.
Oh, yeah, that tends to happen with that.
Yeah, the springs are too weak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just open it and fix it up.
Yeah, so let's look along this wall compared to the adjacent tooth. That's a nice taper. Don't forget the secondary plane.
Okay.
And then compared to the central over here, yeah, you're leaning out a little bit.
Oh, yes.
So recut that taper, and you can try to cut into the shoulder a little bit more at the same time. You got a heavy shoulder here, but you can't really do too much, but you can make it look a little bit better, but you got to get the right taper exactly.
Okay.
So see what happens over there. And then of course 2 millimeters off the incisal, you got a little bit more than that. And over here it's kind of hard to compare without the premolars in, but I think you need to do more incisal reduction there too, but you're pretty close. All right, keep working on it.
Thank you.
Okay, so
My premolar has become so small.
well, yeah, sometimes. Now, you probably didn't need to reduce the distal marginal ridge that much. So that gave you a pretty short wall here on the distal side. You have plenty of clearance over there on the mesial side, but you didn't need to reduce quite that far down. It's like you're trying to keep the ridges centered, but the ridges should be over here. Then the long plane down to the mesial gives you plenty of clearance there, and the short plane here then makes it so you don't reduce the distal wall so much. Okay. So yeah, we took a look at this already in terms of the occlusal reduction. Now what about these tapers? We've got some interesting stuff going on here. So the taper on here, there are two different tapers, and they don't look anything like what you did on the molar, right?
Yeah.
So remember, we can look along the wall and make sure that the taper is exactly the same for the two teeth. So take the middle third right here.
First premolar, we need to compare it with the canine, right?
I'm showing you we can do it on anything.
Okay.
I'm going to type it on. So here's the middle third here. Here's the middle third over here. So this is the taper that you should have been using. Now your shoulder, yeah, getting close to 1 millimeter. But again, the taper here would have been like this, so you're leaning outward there. So let's change this. Again, make sure you get that taper right to the shoulder. Then you'll do a secondary plane up here. So that this taper should match this taper exactly. And then the lingual, make sure it's the same thing. You know, so it looks like you've really leaned the burr the direction that you wanted to. So you're closer here.
Yeah.
You got a little concavity at the bottom. So make sure you keep the end of the burr right at the margin so you know you have exactly the right size chamfer. Same thing over here. Choose your taper and then reduce until the end of the burr gets to the margin. Okay, then you won't be too far off. And then you could do that by direct vision. But you can't do much by direct vision. The rest of it you can do easily by indirect vision. So now it's easy to see what's happening here. So your chamfer is not too bad over here. Maybe a little heavy. But as long as there's not a ski jump, you're still safe. As long as the crep slopes gingerly all the way to the margin, then you're safe. But you can always go over the margin again just to make sure there's no possibility of a ski jump. Okay, and so your taper and your chamfer aren't bad over here. You can smooth it out a little bit, make it a little bit more regular. But again, you can look along the lingual wall this way. You can look along the lingual wall this way. Now over here, of course, it's pretty heavy in this area, right?
Yeah.
So again, when you're looking along this wall, all you do is make sure you keep the end of the burr right there at the margin. And that's the only, that's the chamfer that you would have needed right there. Just at the end of the burr at the margin.
Can you explain what is heavy?
Okay, well, if I keep the end of the burr at the margin and get a chamfer that's the size of the burr, that's a regular uniform. It's a regular chamfer that we do for metal crowns.
Yeah. Okay.
So whether it's a PFM, as in this case, or whether it's an all-metal crown, just a 1/2 millimeter chamfer for the metal.
Okay.
Okay. So if you take this burr, which is designed to give you a 1/2 millimeter chamfer, and reduce until the end of the burr gets to the surface, then by definition you have a perfect 1/2 millimeter chamfer. Okay, but you went this far in, so that would be heavy.
Yeah.
Now on the anterior teeth, when doing an all ceramic crown, you want a chamfer that's got 1 millimeter of axial reduction. So that's what we learned how to do there. And again, make sure you get plenty of taper, and then make the 1/2 millimeter chamfer first, and then raise it and move the whole wall in farther.
Okay.
But we're not going to do that here. This is PFM. Okay, when it's all ceramic, then we have to get a heavier chamfer. And by the way, you're getting undercuts all the way along here.
Yeah.
So again, pay attention to the angle of your burr. Make sure you always have it leaning to the axis, and for all ceramics, especially much, lean the burr toward the axis. Okay, so the shoulder in here, the axial reduction of the shoulder is not too bad. You got a little undercut at the bottom of this wall over here.
Yeah.
And it should be 1 millimeter all the way around to about here. But you know, your chamfer on the mesial side is reasonable. That's a nice little chamfer. But again, you got a little damage with that margin. You can
Yeah.
redo that a little bit. Again, if the end of the burr is always at the margin, then you're always going to get a perfect chamfer. Okay, so keep working on those, but you're getting pretty close. All right, and then we'll be ready to do the lower preps pretty soon. Cool. Sure. There we go. All right, so let me double check here. So let's check the relationship to the opposing tooth. So here's the 1 millimeter ball burnisher, right? So we need to have more than this. But right here I have about a little bit less than that, and over here I have less than that. See? So these are where you have to measure. And see the groove that you have here? It should have been exactly where the opposing ridge is. That's why you don't have enough clearance here. It's because you have the groove in the wrong place. It's not quite matching. Okay, so really pay attention to that. Now over here, it's a little bit easier to check clearance with a bridge with a missing tooth. So your clearance on the B plane here is pretty decent, although you could have gotten it more easily, but we'll discuss that in a minute. You don't have enough clearance over here on the mesial lingual. So again, take every opportunity you have to check each area here, okay? All right, so now, so your ridge here is a reasonable, I'm sorry?
I shifted central groove more facially.
Yeah, and so your ridge here is in a pretty reasonable direction, but you know, point it right toward the center. So the ridge probably should have been about right here. The direction's pretty good, but a little more toward the center. Then you would have the ridge up there, and the central groove probably would have been in better position. And then over here, you know, you can make your C plane a little bit more vertical. That'll keep the central groove a little more in the middle. And don't forget the direction of these ridges. You don't have those ridges. The ridges are parallel, and they're never parallel in the tooth itself, right? Okay, so now your A plane on the premolar. So you got 1.1. But we want 1.3 to 1.5, right? So you haven't reduced it very much. Now, of course, the occlusion on your typodont's pretty hard to evaluate, isn't it? So you're missing so many teeth up here. The equilibration is not so usable. Now, if I squeeze it down a little bit more, I don't have quite enough clearance over there. So, you know, get your A plane done. In B plane, you have nowhere near 1 millimeter yet. So, and your B plane's too horizontal. It should have been a little more vertical. Then keep that central groove a little bit deeper. That'll usually work out better for you. Okay, but see how important it is to just check your clearances? Check the position, check the anatomy compared to the opposing tooth. Okay, and don't move on until you get those things done. Okay, and then of course you're going to change the. This is the other opposing tooth here, but that's. It'd be nice if you had 6 changed, and then you can see if you're having trouble getting clearance there too. All right, keep rolling on it. So tomorrow morning, I want to see a complete evaluation in your workbook. Okay? Okay. Okay, hold on a second. All right, so let's see. Now, when I see a ridge on the A plane, I immediately think, okay, we got a problem.
Okay.
So on the A plane, the grooves are really well defined and the ridges are nice and rounded. So you got kind of the opposite thing happening. Okay, and then if we check here, so you're usually going to keep this rounded, and you know there should be a groove that's exactly opposite this cusp ridge right here, or that triangular ridge right there. So something like that, and then something over here, probably about like this. So just make those grooves, but then in between, everything should be nice and rounded. That's the way we've been doing it. And don't let the burr get too vertical. But you're reducing a lot in here that you didn't need to reduce at all. Okay, so the B plane obviously has enough clearance. It's nice when you can see the whole thing, right? Okay, and your ridge is just about in the right position. The direction's right. I probably would have shifted a little bit more, have it come more toward the center instead of shifting it measly like that. And don't forget to get the vertical angle under control. So plane 1, plane 2, plane 3. On the C plane, you're really vertical, aren't you? You don't need to be that vertical. We need to reduce these cusps, so do it by keeping the planes a little more horizontal. Then you can keep the end of the burr in the central groove here.
Okay.
So you made a different central groove over here than you had here. So watch the vertical angle. Then you can control things. And of course, this cusp, this whole area, we want to do a full millimeter of reduction on. We're going to compare it to the distal lingual cusp when we finish.
Okay.
Now, when you do the premolar, you start with the A plane. But you started with the B plane. See that? So make an A plane out here and make sure it fits the opposing tooth really nicely.
Okay. Yes.
Get the clearance that you want. Then you can do the B plane. And again, watch the vertical angle, watch location of the central groove, so forth. And replace this tooth, and then you might be shifting that ridge a little more to the mesial to fit between the two opposing teeth.
Okay.
Okay? And then, so finish the whole thing, and I'll see it in the workbook tomorrow.
Okay.
Really evaluate it carefully. All right. Okay, moving along. Well, where's your A plane here? You think you're doing a maxillary premolar? Okay.
No, for premolar also we need to put the grooves on the bucket.
No. A plane. You've got to reduce the contacts out here. See that? Look at the opposing tooth.
Yeah.
You've got very little clearance. That's because you didn't reduce the A contacts. A, B, C, just like on the molar over here. A, B, C.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
All right. So then you can see if you're going to get the clearance and so forth.
Yeah.
On the molar, yeah, a little bit more clearance than you need, but you got the right idea. You got the basic positions. You can really make these grooves very well defined. That's always nice to do. Now your A plane's a little bit small because it looks like you over-reduced the facial quite a bit.
Yeah.
Okay? But your clearances on the B plane, yeah, they're probably a little more than you, well, when I squeeze the top of that down, it's just not really well equilibrated. Your clearances look pretty good. And then on the C plane, yeah, so check the distal lingual. You're going to have to check with the registration material or something. Make sure you check that. Make sure you're really happy with the occlusal clearances everywhere before you start doing any axial reduction. When you do the facial axial reduction, we look this way, right? We have to look, we just look along the wall. Every time we're doing any axial reduction anywhere, we look along the wall.
I have a question. Can we use this burr for axial reduction at the buccal?
Which one
side?
here?
This one, yeah.
For a gold crown?
Yes.
Why would you do that? Okay, we don't want a shoulder. All we want is a nice little 1/2 millimeter chamfer. That's the end. That's what we're looking for. So yeah, if you're doing a PFM, it's a whole different thing.
Yeah, on the anterior,
Whole different thing.
We can use
Anterior, posterior, as long as you're doing porcelain. But here, we just want a millimeter chamfer, or a 1/2 millimeter chamfer. The look along the arch, and you can take the taper the way we usually do, parallel to the middle third. But I'll drop gingerly more to try to keep the chamfer a little bit more under control. But I'm going to do more reduction, or more gingival position. I'm going to reduce it at the right taper.
Okay.
And I'm going to keep checking it and double checking it so I know I've got the right taper and the right chamfer. Okay, and then I can do a secondary plane up here. So on the mesial half, we have something that looks like we want that to look. So about a 1/2 millimeter chamfer right down here. Okay?
Yeah.
Instead of a pretty close to a millimeter over here. But again, I went gingerly farther, so it got a little bit smaller. When you come through here, use your 877, so you know that you can keep a nice uniform chamfer. Did a little bit better job over here, but still heavy chamfer. And when you're coming through the proximals, you're going to need to look from the lingual for part of it. Then look this way. Okay? Then you can bring it right through. So you can look from the facial, you can look from the lingual, and do that distal proximal, so it's just not that hard. This comes right together, as long as you keep the end of the burr at the margin. All the time. Okay, it's coming along.
For the lingual, is it heavy?
Well, let's take a look. So you can even measure it with a ball burnisher. It should be half the ball burnisher, right?
Yes.
Half the small end. So, yeah, and you're not tapering enough. You need to taper.
Yeah.
So you lean the burr away from the axis, and then the end of the burr got inside the tooth.
Yeah.
So, and you're likely to get a ski jump and an undercut, and you're definitely over-reduced. You got about 0.8. Yeah, so this is about 0.4. So, yeah, we're just looking for a nice 1/2 millimeter chamfer. But make it a definite chamfer, though. So the end of the burr, just use a regular chamfer burr. Just keep the end of the burr at the margin all the time, but you got to be looking along every wall. Don't ever touch a wall unless you're looking along the wall, not at the wall. Okay? All right? Cool.